Right, so hello, good evening, and welcome to Stowe Talks. Now, everybody's joining. I can see the numbers going up. Tonight's session it's about making money go further after divorce. Okay, you know that because you've signed up for this session. You may feel that tonight's topic is a bit of a departure from the norm. And you're right, obviously, to a degree. We're not taking a deep dive into a gritty family law issue tonight, but we're talking about money. We're talking about money and well-being and how to manage money. Now, we know that money is one of the most frightening aspects of a relationship breakdown. Money impacts everything. It impacts all your decisions. To be clear, we're not going to be talking about financial settlements themselves. I'm here to answer any questions, obviously, but we're not talking about financial settlements tonight. We're talking about how to gain confidence managing your own money post-divorce, but making it go further. So this is an extension of a previous topic we've done, where we've been talking about doing our bit to improve our own relationship with money, build our own confidence around money, so to reduce our worries, reduce our financial concerns. And I'm delighted tonight to be welcoming back Jodie Phelps. Now, Jodie is a financial planner. She helps people organise their money. It's quite a cool skill to have. Now, she's on our radar in particular because she's passionate. She's passionate about educating people about money and helping people manage their feelings about money and around money. Okay, Jodie's also a people person, and she's a great communicator, which I think really makes a massive difference when you're talking about a difficult subject like money. She makes something that's really daunting very accessible to everybody. And tonight we've got quite a few things to get through. We're going to be talking about budgets. We're going to be talking about how to save on your outgoings, manage your mortgage, reducing tax, how to grow your savings, the possibility of creating a second income. And of course, as usual, we're going to have plenty of time for questions. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover, and tonight's session is going to be practical. It's going to be empowering. Our goal is to help you feel more in control once you have your settlements. Now, I've been a divorce lawyer for an awfully long time now, and I found over the years that it's quite common when you get your final financial settlement to feel a bit flat. You feel a bit lost. You've been striving to get to that position for such a long period of time sometimes that when it comes, you're not quite sure what to do with yourself. If from the financial settlement you've got capital to invest, then you've already been pointed in the direction of independent financial advice. So you know what you're doing with that sort of thing. Today, we're talking more about day-to-day finances and day-to-day worries, okay? I believe that the initial period after the financial settlement has been secured is, as I say, when people feel at sea. Many people might be managing their finances on their own for the first time ever. And essentially, we have to address the fact that when you're getting divorced, you're essentially making two households out of what was one household. And for most of us, that situation would be a real financial stretch. So it's normal to feel overwhelmed. Hopefully we can give you some practical tips tonight. And as I say, whilst we do relish bringing you the harder aspects of family law, tonight's session should help bring reassurance and practical tips in what is quite an anxious time, really. Now, I'm just going to whiz through some housekeeping. If you've joined us before, you'll know these points that I tend to say every month. Now, to be clear, we're not giving financial advice, okay? These are tips regarding managing your finances. As always, there is the caveat: you should always seek independent financial advice about your specific circumstances. A big welcome to new listeners, and welcome back to old friends, obviously. It's likely you've registered for this webinar because you've got an interest. You might be somebody going through a divorce, somebody who's newly divorced, you might be somebody supporting someone who's in that situation, you might be a law student or another lawyer, a counsellor, just looking to learn more. And that's lovely. We welcome you in whatever capacity you're here with us tonight. Now, I think you'll have seen that we are recording tonight's session, which is normal. It's quite interactive, so please feel free to use the Q&A function on Zoom. Okay, this is a safe space. It's a safe space for people to listen. It's a safe space for people to ask questions. And also we've enabled the chat function so you can make comment. You don't always have to be asking a question, but please obviously be respectful to each other on the chat. I know that you always are. Last piece of housekeeping, please feel free to give us feedback. These webinars are driven by you, driven by the people who listen to them. And so let us know what you want to hear about. Let us know what kind of experts you want us to introduce you to. I think I'm loving these sessions that we're doing with Jodie. There is so much more to talking about divorce than just talking about the law and what to expect in financial settlement and why the law works as it is. There are so many aspects of the well-being element of relationship breakdown that we have to cover, and we're getting to do that, which is lovely for me. Okay, so the format is going to be as usual. It's going to be Jodie's presentation. We've got some slides tonight, and then we're going to do questions. So without further ado, welcome Jodie. How are you?
Hi Sarah. Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Great. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I think you've got control of the screen, so I'll let you do what you need to do with the slides and fire away.
Lovely, thank you. So yes, a little bit about me before I begin. So as Sarah explained, I'm a financial planner. I am particularly passionate about, first of all, financial education. You know, we're not taught in school or college how to manage money, and there is a real gap there. So I am really passionate about teaching people about that. And also about financial well-being. So I've touched on it in previous talks, but actually your financial well-being massively it affects your overall mental well-being, and if you're not on top of your finances, it can cause stress, anxiety, sleep problems. So yeah, really passionate about helping people improve their financial and overall well-being. I have been through divorce myself, so this is another reason I really like to help people who are going through it or have been through it. You know, it's yeah, massive kind of part of going through divorce is money. So to kind of get to the point where you have that financial freedom at the end of it is a really great feeling. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to help some of you listening, or all of you listening today. So this is the agenda for today. So how to budget, how to save on household bills and other expenses, ways to reduce tax, managing your mortgage, ways to grow your savings and creating a second income. At the end, there will be times for question and answers, so we'll go from there. So first of all, budgeting. So you know, you probably hear that a lot, but I guess it's understanding the importance of it. So budgeting enables you to feel in control of your finances and reduces stress, helps you to control unnecessary spending, improves debt management, and helps you to achieve your financial goals. So especially if you have been through divorce, you're now on your kind of new journey for your new life and you'll have new goals. So this is a reason budgeting can be really important. And before kind of thinking about how to improve your how you're managing your money at the moment and how you're budgeting, it's really important to reflect on how your kind of current relationship with money. So how do you view money at the moment? How do you spend your money? You know, have you got any bad habits? So reflecting on how you've been managing your money until now, and also, you know, what works well. What are you doing well, and reflect really on any kind of habits that you may have picked up from childhood. You know, you may have seen your parents managing money and there's probably certain phrases you've heard them say. So I guess understanding where you are before kind of moving forward is quite an important thing to do. Okay, so first of all, step one, I'd say it's really good to have some clear goals. So actually, why is it important to you to be, budgeting and managing your money? What are you trying to achieve? So it might be that you're trying to buy a house, you want to save for your children's education. So kind of having those clear goals at the beginning, it just enables you to remember the reason that you are, saving each month, or you're trying not to spend unnecessarily. So setting yourself clear goals each year is really important. So tracking your income and reviewing your outgoings. So I always say to my clients, I'm always like, what have you got coming in and what have you got going out? And I'd say 90% of them don't really know. But I think actually, how can you feel on top of your finances if you don't even know what you've got coming in and what you've got going out? So kind of having a look at, what comes in and your outgoings is definitely something to do. It's really good to refine. So what's your essential spending and what's your discretionary spending? So if you refine, actually, this is the money I have to spend every month, this is my essential spending, having that in one account to then pay out your bills, and then setting yourself a budget for your kind of fun money in a spending account. It's just a real good way to kind of feel on top of things, and you don't have to suddenly worry about bills coming out because you've set it aside, that essential spending money. So as I said earlier, so analyze your past spending habits, what's worked well, what's worked not so well, what do you want to improve on. So number 5, so it's really good to set realistic spending budgets. So if you enjoy a takeaway, then make sure you set yourself a kind of a budget for that. So you might think, actually, I'm going to set myself an amount to have a takeaway a week. Because if you're too strict on yourself and you're too unrealistic, you're just going to set yourself up for failure. And also, life is about having fun and enjoying it, rather than just doing what's completely sensible for the long term. So setting yourself aside money for yourself to have fun, doing things you enjoy, is really important. Setting up regular payments for savings is something that I think is very effective. I think out of sight, out of mind. So if, for example, you set up a regular payment for a couple of £100 into a savings account each month, if that automatically goes out, you'll probably forget it's even gone out or the money's even there. Whereas if you say to yourself, do you know what, I'm going to save what I can each month, you probably won't save. So actually having an amount that goes out regularly, set it up on standing order, it just, out of sight, out of mind, and that's kind of taking care of itself in the background. So build an emergency fund. So it's always sensible to have an emergency fund. I'd say generally about 3 to 6 months worth of your essential outgoings, just in case, something goes wrong, you've got a little pot of money to lean back on. And then review and adjust regularly. So each year, have a look at your budgets, have a look at your income, your outgoing, what's changed, what's working, and go from there. And if you realize, actually, I'm spending a bit more money on your fun money than you plan to, then maybe increase that budget and go from there. So next, just going to touch on how to save on household bills and other expenses. So always regularly review and negotiate household bills. So if you don't do this, then things just kind of can skyrocket up. So when you get through your when you're at the end of the term of your energy bills or your insurances, make sure you're having a look around and making sure that that's still the cheapest one or the best, most suitable one available. Exploring bundling services for discounts. So often providers, if you have all your services with them, may do a discount. So explore the option there. I always think plan meals in advance. I know what it's like if you haven't planned it. You often end up going to the expensive places, or, co-op down the road, or ordering a takeaway. So actually, if you plan what meals you're going to have in advance, you can make sure you buy the food in a cost-effective way. Utilize vouchers, cashback options. Be mindful of impulse purchases. I've touched on this before, but when you're feeling down, it's so easy to kind of spend money to get that instant gratification. So yeah, if you're feeling down, think to yourself, actually, am I just spending this to make myself feel better? Because quite often in the long term, you'll make yourself feel worse, because then you're worried about money. And then just give yourself a little note of other things you could do which you enjoy in that moment. So it may be, do you know what, actually, I'm not going to spend that money. I'm going to FaceTime a friend, or going to go for a walk, or have a bath, or whatever kind of brings you that enjoyment. Review insurance policies. So these, renowned for kind of just increasing every year. So make sure you see what's available. Review and cancel subscriptions. So when you're going through your list of outgoings, everything you're spending, are you still using them services? And I know you can do it on your, like if you've got an Apple phone, have a look at what subscriptions you're paying for, because a lot of clients I see, they're paying for things they don't even realize they're paying for, or they're paying for things they don't use anymore. Or it might be that you're paying for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Now TV, Disney, and you're paying for all these things and you think, actually, do I need to be paying for all of these different subscriptions? So as I said before, set yourself a budget for meals out and takeaways, and review your mobile phone deals. So when they come to the end, make sure you're reviewing them with the provider. And finally, exploring budget-friendly fitness options. Okay, so next we're going to speak about something probably a little bit more complex, so ways to consider saving tax. There are quite a few different ways you can look at saving tax, but I've chosen just to focus on a couple of them in a bit more detail today. So first of all, so pensions. So pensions can be a really, they are really tax efficient way to save money for your future. What I would say is it all depends on what the goal is as to what you do with the money. So say, for example, you're 30 and you want to save money for something in 10 years' time, a pension may not be the best option. Well, it wouldn't be the best option because you can't access it then. However, if it's kind of for the longer term and you know that you can't touch it until you're 55, 57, then this is how it can work. So a basic rate taxpayer would pay in £80, the government tops it up by 20, higher rate taxpayer 60, and the government top it up by 40. And then, as you can see there, for additional rate taxpayer. So if you are in those kind of higher rate, additional rate tax brackets, it can be really effective way to save money. So always explore the option of, either your employer or private pensions to see if this is suitable. Secondly, something to consider is the tax allowances each year. So every tax year, these differ slightly. So I've just detailed on here allowances for this tax year. So in this tax year, you can save up to £20,000 in an ISA. Once we get to 6th of April, then you've got an additional 20,000 and so on throughout the years. The reason this is important, especially the last couple of years, is we've seen, increase in savings interest rates. But what people don't realise is if they're, for example, earning 5% on a savings account, if it's not in an ISA, then they could be having to pay tax on that. So they might be making 5%. If they're a higher rate taxpayer, they might then have to pay 40% tax on it if they're earning more than their savings allowance, which is also detailed down there. So to consider, if you are saving money, make sure it is in the most tax efficient place, because you don't want to make loads of money on savings and then end up having to pay lots of tax on it. So just detailed here, we've got an ISA allowance of £20,000 each year, which can be a combination of cash and stocks and shares ISAs. Junior ISA allowance for anybody with children, you can save up to £9,000 at the moment each tax year in their names. Dividend allowance of £1,000, and then, as I touched on earlier, the savings allowance. So for basic rate taxpayer, you can earn up to £1,000 in savings interest without paying tax, £500 for higher rate taxpayers, and nothing for additional rate taxpayers. So for those higher rate taxpayers, actually the last couple of years you may have been earning more than £500 in savings interest, but then obviously you're having to pay all of 40% tax on that. But yeah, what I would caveat with, obviously today I'm giving you kind of information, but finance is so complex, it's really good to kind of seek advice on your own personal situation to see what the best options are. Okay, next I'm going to move on to how to effectively manage your mortgage. So one thing I'd say is really important is to educate yourself. I literally just typed into Google earlier as mortgage jargon, and there's so many different phrases that if you don't research, then you don't understand what they mean. And how are you supposed to make decisions about your mortgage if you don't understand what the terms mean. So a few of them I wrote down. So there's LTV, so loan to value, equity, agreement in principle, fixed rate, early repayment charge, variable rate, APR. So there's so many different phrases that when you're choosing what to do with your mortgage, yeah, you're not taught, like I mentioned earlier, not taught in school what these things mean. So take time and educate yourself. And even if you Google it, there's kind of lots of links to places where you kind of give you definitions of all these, the jargon that people in finance like to use. I'd always say it's a really good idea to consider the term carefully. So when you're choosing your mortgage, is actually thinking about the term you're going to have it for, and what's right for you right now. So I often say to clients, actually, what's affordable for you now? So they might want to choose the shortest term, but actually you can, remortgage quite a few times before you retire. So it's a good idea to always consider the term carefully. Don't overcommit, and we've seen why in the last couple of years. It used to be that rates were as low as 1-2%, now they're 4-5 and beyond percent. So actually don't always push yourself so much to what you can afford, because we don't know what's around the corner with rates. Consider overpayment. So if you do have some spare income or bonuses, an option of what you can do with that is overpay on your mortgage. It's usually about 10% of the mortgage outstanding per year. But that would then in turn reduce the term of the mortgage. But again, the reason I say consider is because it depends what other financial goals you have. But it's always a good idea to reduce debt if you can. So ensure you have a contingency plan if your income stops. So what I mean by this is if you suddenly can't work or you're out of work, what's plan B to how you're going to pay this mortgage. So it could be that you've got a good emergency fund, so you've saved a pot of money so that actually that can cover your mortgage for a while. But also protection, so things like income protection, so that if you can't work, then you have got money that would then pay your mortgage until you're in work again. So it's always good to kind of have the kind of worst case scenarios and make sure you are protected. Consider refinance options carefully. So it may be that you want to borrow some money to renovate your house, and the mortgage may be a cheaper option than a personal loan. However, if you take lending out for the whole term of a mortgage, it may end up being that you'll end up paying more interest overall than a shorter term loan. So it's just to make sure you consider the different options in refinance rather than just jumping in. Reassess your loan to value when reviewing your mortgage rates. So what loan to value means, for those of you who may not know, is how much your borrowing is compared to the property value. So say if you've got a property, to make it easy, worth 100,000, your mortgage is 80,000, you would have an 80% loan to value. So how much borrowing you have compared to the property's worth. The more equity you have, so the lower the amount of debt you have in comparison to the property price, the better rates you will have. So it may mean that when you first took that mortgage out, you had 80% loan to value, but now because you've overpaid and the property's gone up in value, it may be that you only have 60% loan to value, and you may be able to get better rates. So when you are looking at remortgaging or fixing in new rates, make sure you discuss it with a provider or mortgage companies and make sure they know what your loan to value is, because you could be saving money there. Always ensure suitable buildings insurance is in place. I personally know somebody who wasn't paying buildings insurance and their house burnt down, and they had a mortgage on it, so they had to keep paying the mortgage, didn't have a house anymore. So so make sure you always have buildings insurance in place, but also what's suitable. So if you've extended your house, you've got extra bedrooms, or you've done anything to the house, make sure your insurance company knows, so that the buildings insurance is still still suitable. If you are facing financial difficulty, speak to the lender and see if there's anything they can do to help. Consider porting your mortgage when moving. So people often think a big misconception I come across are people thinking they have to wait to the end of their fixed term in their mortgage to be able to move house. What a lot of mortgage companies offer is to port the mortgage. So what that means is move the mortgage from the old house to the new house, meaning that you don't necessarily have to pay to come out of the fixed term, or you don't have to wait till the end of the fixed term. So yeah, porting a mortgage is literally when you take your mortgage, you put it on the new property. There's additional borrowing, you can do that on a separate mortgage part. So just something to consider if you are moving, that you don't have to necessarily pay that early repayment charge. There could be an option of porting the mortgage. And then finally, just staying informed on mortgage markets. You know, if you're fixed in at 6% and rates suddenly go down to 2%, it may be worth paying that early withdrawal charge, coming out and going for another mortgage on a lower rate. So just keeping an eye on what mortgage rates are doing, listening to news, researching it, just to make sure what you are doing, and also speaking to advisors, mortgage advisors, financial advisors, if you are concerned, who will obviously offer you advice which is suitable. Okay, so next we're going to talk about how to best grow your money over the longer term. First of all, what I would say is I always use this analogy. So have 3 pots of money. So I liken the analogy to the kitchen, maybe because I like food, but to have your fresh, your fridge, and your freezer. So your fresh money is your money that you're going to use. So your instantly accessible money for the short term, plus a bit of an emergency fund. So anything you've got planned expenditure in the very near future, plus, yeah, an emergency fund there. You've got your second pot, which is like a fridge. So that might be in the next 4 or 5 years. So it might be that, you know, next year you want to pay for a big holiday, 2 years time you want to buy a car. So yeah, the next pot is that kind of medium term savings. With the first pot, so your fresh pot, you want that really in some instantly accessible savings. The second pot, again, it'd be good to have a look at compare savings rates, but you may want to fix some of it for a short term, for a year, if the rates are better. But yeah, the second pot, again, is just having it in some kind of savings account. And then the third pot is usually kind of 5 years and beyond. So it may be that you say, do you know what, my 8-year-old, I want to pay for them to go to university in 10 years, or actually it's my retirement that I want to save for. And the 5-year and beyond pot is where you really want to make that money work for you, because if that money just stays in cash, over the long term, it will just depreciate, because the cost of living increases, goes up, and savings rate doesn't ever really keep up with the pace of inflation. So that's what I'm going to go on to speak about in a bit more detail now. So first of all, why diversification is so important. So the saying, don't have all your eggs in one basket, is something I use with clients all the time. But one thing I would say is to consider is, yeah, not having all your eggs in one basket. So for example, here, if we look at 2022, US equities. So this is all the different assets. So this is different things that you can invest money in. So we've got UK property, UK gilts, deposit accounts, that's like cash savings, US equities, so companies in the US, commodities, so like more raw materials, oil and gas, that type of thing. And then we've got UK equities, emerging markets, European equities, and Far East equities. And what this shows is each year how they have ranked in terms of performance. So if we have a look here in 2022, US equities were 8th out of 9th, so really didn't do very well. But what this shows really is you don't want to just base what you're doing now on past performance, because if in 2022 I looked at this, or 2023 I looked at this and thought, do you know what, I'm not investing in US equities because they were the bottom of the ranking, and then suddenly the next year actually they're top again. So it's really just shows you why it's really important to have things invested in lots of different places. And when I put investment portfolios or pensions together for my clients, I'll ensure they have the money spread out to make sure they don't suddenly lose the money, and it's kind of diverse and in a good position to grow over the longer term. Just another example here. So 2022, Deposit accounts were one of the highest, one of the best assets. So it might be that then people are thinking, actually, I'm going to put all my money in cash savings because, you know, cash savings are great at the moment. And then 2023, it's back to 7th again. So it just shows there actually having, your eggs spread out in lots of baskets is the way forward. Okay, so the next graph here, so this is about why investing makes sense. For that final pot, for that kind of freezer pot where you think actually you're not going to touch that in the next 5 years, you want that to grow over the longer term. It just shows how different assets have performed over the longer term. So this is since 2001. So we've got the green line is cash. So as you can see, it's kind of steady, but hasn't done very much since then. So if you invested £100,000 in 2001, it would be worth just over about 125,000 now. Whereas if you invested purely in equity, so that's in companies, that £100,000 in 2001 would now be worth close to £425,000. So yeah, it just shows as well, because a lot of the time people think actually, you know, for example, coronavirus 2020, you see the real big drop there. So between the January and the March, things dropped by, I think it's about 20%. So everyone was panicking, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to invest in that anymore. The world's going to come to an end. But then by the November, everything was back up again. But it just shows here, actually, if you've got money that you want to earmark for the longer term, you are the way that you make money is through equities, through property, bonds, over cash. But what I would say is really important is to make sure you do have some cash available for your shorter term goals, and also an emergency fund just in case you need it before you explore other options. But again, if you've got a pension or investments, as an advisor, I would say having a bit of a mixture is always best to kind of ensure you have not too volatile returns. But yeah, it's quite interesting having a look at all the different things that have happened. And you might have the initial drops, but actually over the longer term, it's quite clear to see what makes more money. Okay, so some general top tips to add to that, really. So as I touched on, rather than just investing money, ensuring you've got that emergency fund there, and short-term expenditure in cash. So I often say to my clients, get a pen and paper, write down actually the next few years what you are likely to spend money on, and make sure you do retain that amount in cash. And then, as I said before, 3 to 6 months worth of your essential outgoings as well. So before thinking of anything more, like investing, making sure you have built yourself a good emergency fund. Always consider tax efficiency. So you can save money, really well, but then you don't want to do something that then you're going to end up being taxed on. So considering tax efficiency is really important. Regularly review and adjust. So, you might put the best plan in place now, but as we all know, life changes. We go through separation, we have children, we move house, we move jobs, we might, go for bereavement. So actually all these big key life events, really important times for you to reflect and review your financial plan and adjust it, but also having that regular review each year. And then lastly, seeking professional advice. So everything I've told you today, obviously some key information and views, but it very much depends on your own individual situation as to what I would recommend you do. Okay, so just a few tips on creating a second income. So this one is going to be very different for every person, depending on your your current situation. But the kind of things that come to mind when I think about this is, first of all, just to kind of have a notebook and pen and reflect on, what are your strengths, what are you good at, what services could you offer people. But not only that, if it's a second income, it's really important to think about actually what do you enjoy? Because if you're already working, a full-time job or what have you, you've got to think about not just making money. It's got a bit about your kind of mindset and your feeling happy. So I guess thinking about actually what are you going to enjoy doing is really important. Also to prioritize time. and consistency. You know, if you are going to put effort into doing something, make sure you earmark time in your diary, and make sure you're doing things consistently to get that reward there. So there's two types of income, and again, I'd say to diversify would be the best thing you could do. So there's passive income and active income. So active income is, your jobs, your 9 to 5 or whatever you're doing each day to earn an income. Second to that is something called passive income. And that's where you manage to earn money, earn an income without having to actually do anything. So the ways you can do this is, first of all, through investment. So it might be that you're investing money, and the money that's making, you're then taking as income. So investments, but also it could be that you've got a rental property, and obviously that's bringing in an income. So ideally you would have a bit of both, an active income and a passive income. But the important thing is, if you do have, investments or savings, is not to be taking income for it to just be sat there and then sat in cash and not doing anything. So actually thinking about, do you need to be taking an income from that? And then the final thing I'd say really is a lot said for investing in your earning potential. So rather than thinking actually, what else can I do to earn money? Actually, are there any courses you can do, anything you can do to educate yourself to progress in your current field to enable you to make more money? So those are kind of a few tips there on creating a second income. So what I'll do now is just move on to, I know we've got some things in the chat that we'll look through, but just open up to any questions anyone has on any of the areas I've gone through. And yeah, of course, there's also my email address, and I'm on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to speak about their own situation separately, then feel free. Finance is something that's really personal, and it's money can be a real taboo subject. So I often find people don't really want to ask questions in front of people. So if anyone wants to catch up separately, then feel free to email me, and we can speak separately.
Lovely, Jodie, that was brilliant. I've made some notes for myself, actually, as we've been going through. I definitely don't have 3 pots. I don't have a fresh, a fridge and a freezer. I know that. I have a kind of a scrambled, very scrambled kind of arrangement there, I'm afraid. So I'm going to refine and improve my own habits. I do like doing these sessions because I really benefit. Okay, so let's have a look and see what we've got in terms of questions, etc. Okay, so we're kind of going straight in on this one. So somebody's kind of put on that the part of their divorce settlement is a lump sum. So that's a fairly common scenario, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Is it better to invest the lump sum or pay off a mortgage? They'd have enough to reduce the mortgage to about 40,000.
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and it's a really common question that I help people with. I think, first of all, you want to have a look at what interest rate are you paying on your mortgage, and then compare that to actually what interest are you likely to get if you invest it in savings or investment. Because if your mortgage rate's really high and you're not going to achieve that in savings, then technically the better option would be to pay off your mortgage. However, what I would say is it very much depends on your own goals. So actually that 40,000, is there anything that you want to spend that on? Are there any kind of financial goals you have? Because once you've paid off your mortgage, it's then not accessible because it's in the house. So what I normally do with clients who have that is kind of really kind of get them to delve into what their financial goals are, what they're trying to achieve, what expenses they may have, before just saying, right, yeah, pay it off your mortgage. And often it might be a bit of both. It might be actually you pay a bit off your mortgage and save a little bit. But it very much depends on your kind of own situation. But hopefully that's helped a little bit.
Definitely. It's very easy, I suppose. Well, for me as a divorce lawyer, say, go and see an IFA, go and see an independent financial advisor when you need help. That's part of my day-to-day working life. It's pretty daunting, I think, for most people. And one of the things that I think people are quite curious about is getting advice from an IFA. How much is it essentially to get advice from an IFA? Is there a barrier? Do you have to invest a certain amount of money? Do you have to have lots of money? In my experience, different IFAs have different kind of ceilings, I suppose. But if you're able to talk us through a bit of that.
That's fine. So I offer like no obligation initial meetings. So, you know, first hour, you don't pay anything for, just to get a sense of actually a bit of, you know, do we get on as well? Because if you're going to take on a new client, actually you're going to be seeing that person every year. So, you know, is there that, that chemistry there? But yeah, so a lot of people offer that first meeting as a complimentary or no obligation. And then from there, if there's anything they'd recommend, you'd kind of get details of any fees that would be applicable. But some IFAs do work, you know, on an hourly basis. So they might charge per hour, they might charge a flat fee, or it might just be that you pay like a charge within the actual investment. To say, for example, you invest £20,000, you may pay an ongoing charge. So for example, 1% of that each year, which goes towards the management and the advice of it. Yeah, so it's really important when you first speak to an advisor to establish, first of all, how much will that initial meeting charge cost? And a lot of the time out from that initial meeting, you'll take loads away anyway. Even if you don't continue to work with that person, you will take a lot away from that. And then at the next point, it's actually, if they do recommend anything, what are the costs? But in our in my field, we do have to be really transparent about any costs. So you wouldn't suddenly be tricked into anything or suddenly, you know, have a bill sent to you that you weren't expecting. It's not how we work. But yeah, personally, like I said, it's a no obligation first meeting, which is usually around an hour.
Good. So much like lawyers, I'm not sure most lawyers always give an hour, but and I always say when you're looking for a divorce lawyer or lawyer in general, there's nothing, you probably won't appreciate this, Jodie, but there's nothing wrong with doing your beauty parade, making sure that you're putting time and effort into selecting the person that's right for you. That's part of the reason they're offering these free appointments. They want clients that they gel with too. Yeah. Don't be afraid to see different people, take advantage of those free appointments. I know in our area in divorce law, it's a really quirky area of law and everybody explains it differently. I'm pretty sure, Jodie, it's the same for you.
Yeah, and I think, I often feel like a counsellor, or, because a lot of the time I'm going to meet clients and finding out everything about their lives, and you need to feel comfortable that you can speak to that person, because that's where you're going to get the most value out of that relationship. For me, understanding, my client's position now, where they want to get to, and their past and everything, that puts me in the best position to help them. So you do need to have that kind of rapport. But yeah, I'd agree with you there, Sarah, that I've had clients before and they've met spoken to a few different people to find that best fit for them. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think having ongoing advice is something that's really important, because I could give somebody advice and say, right, there you go, that's what you want to do, see you later. But actually a year's time, their life could have changed, the world could have changed. So actually keeping up with it is really important. I've just seen a question here as well about, so my ex-partner dealt with all the finances, so I'm not very confident. And that is something I come across a lot in divorce, and in life, even people who aren't divorced. It always seems to be one person in a relationship is the person who deals with finances. So I always, try to tell people, actually show interest, get involved, understand it, because you never know what's around the corner. And whether it's divorce or suddenly their partner may pass away or something, and they're left with managing that money, I see people on the other side of it. So if you are in that position where you've never dealt with finances before and suddenly you have to think about that, I would definitely recommend a meeting with a financial advisor, even if it's to helping you understand like where you are at the moment. And when people have been through divorce, I often think it's really important to take baby steps rather than thinking, let's look at everything now. Actually, the first step is just understanding like where you are at the moment. The next step is understanding, okay, where do you want to get to? And taking things in like bite sizes is really effective, because when you have been through a lot and when it's new to you, it can be so overwhelming if you think about everything at once.
Yes, absolutely. We don't underestimate the effect of going through relationship breakdown on people. You're ultimately introducing strangers into your life, and in several situations you never anticipated having to introduce strangers into your life and talk to them about things you never thought you'd talk about. So yeah, it is a very difficult time. We try and be as sympathetic as we possibly can be, I must admit, but we also need to keep you on track as well. If anybody needs any recommendations for divorce coaches, what have you, obviously just drop us a line, that's not a problem. I've got a question here about the CSA. Now, Child Support Agency, or Child Maintenance Service as it now is there any way around it? The short answer is no. You are able to agree a sum of money for child maintenance with the other parents outside of the CMS. That's not a problem in a kind of a homemade agreement. If you're getting divorced, you can incorporate that homemade agreement in your consent order, and that will last for 12 months. And then either of you have the ability to go off to have an assessment done by the CMS afterwards. If you're not sure what your liability is going to be, feel free to get in touch with a lawyer to work through it. Might be easier than obviously waiting for the CMS to go through your company accounts. But may well be that we do a session on child maintenance in due course, because it is a bit of a minefield, I'm afraid, and it's not a circle you want to get kind of caught in. Right, now, where are we? Let's have a look at the other questions.
The other thing I didn't answer as well, I know you touched on it, I've just seen a question that kind of touches on it as well, is the minimum criteria. So some advisors may say, you know, you need X amount to speak to me, but that's not industry wide. So, you know, some advisors will have a minimum criteria. I personally will speak to anybody because I believe, you know, in making financial advice accessible, you know, there's a real gap, and that needs to happen. But I guess it's something to unfortunately there's not a straight answer there. It is kind of case by case and dependent on the advisor.
Mm-hmm. Yes. In the Q&A section, Jodie, we've got a question here. Somebody's having a really tough time with a divorce that's being drawn out by their ex. She's suffering some post-separation abuse and obviously financial abuse as well. At the moment, she's having difficulty planning. I'm saying she, I don't know. He or she is having difficulty planning as to what their future financial circumstances will be, because their spouse is unlikely to provide any financial support unless it's court ordered. Okay, so this is a fairly familiar situation, unfortunately, to be in. This person's got limited ability to work because their child has additional needs, so they would prefer a clean break, but ongoing maintenance will be needed. They'd like to think about the future, and they'd like to plan as much as is practical. Any suggestions? I think it's starting small, isn't it, Jodie?
Yeah, I think going through actually a budget of like actually what you really need is probably, I know I've said it a few times, but actually figuring out what you really need is a good starting point. And I guess it's really hard to plan when you don't know what the outcome will be yet. So yeah, I guess it's just kind of regularly reviewing it, and when you do know what the financial outcome is, then making a plan from there. But yeah, starting small and understanding actually what you really need, what the necessities right now, what's most important to you, and going from there is probably helpful. I mean, we're more than happy to speak separately about your exact situation, but yeah, hopefully you get somewhere there.
And we know it's a difficult process because it's very easy for us as lawyers to say, do us a budget, let us know what all your outgoings are. That's a mammoth task for somebody who's just gone through relationship breakdown and might have kids at home and a host of other worries. I always say to clients, when you're doing a budget, just break it down into small pieces. Just deal with your outgoings for your house to start with. Then maybe on another night, sit down and work out what your outgoings for the kids are. Don't forget to include your holidays. Don't forget to include that you might have a newspaper on a Sunday. Don't forget that you've signed up for various charitable direct debits. I always forget about those. Look at what your TV packages and your broadband and things like that. The key is, if you're looking at ongoing maintenance, we need to lock down what your outgoings definitely are. And yes, it is a headache because you're quite often sitting there, sometimes late at night, because that's the only time we all have, going through your bank statements, trying to work out, well, what do I spend on my electricity, or things like that. I think probably most of us know exactly what we're spending on electricity nowadays, but you know what I mean. It's difficult. I wouldn't be able to tell you immediately what I paid on my mobile phone necessarily, and it's difficult when you've got lawyers saying, I need this, I need to know that. So being prepared as best you can, I think, knowing that people are going to want to know what you spend each month is important. And don't panic, you know, and don't err on the side of caution. Make sure you get everything in. Now, let me just check. Jodie, have I missed anything in the chat or the questions?
No, I was just going to add to that. It's like one of those tasks, isn't it, where you're like, actually, no one enjoys it. It's not going to be enjoyable. But actually, the way you'll feel afterwards will make you feel better. And I think it's just knowing that actually once you know that, but also being realistic with it. I think it's so easy to be like, oh, you know, I need all this money. But actually, what you want to do is be realistic. So then actually, when you're going into court or mediation or whatever it is, you can really show that is what you need. So yeah, I'd like you said, go through your bank statements. I've got a budget planner spreadsheet that kind of covers everything that you could possibly spend money on, and so having those subjects there and going through. But I'm happy to share that with you. I think I have before, but I'll share it again. But yeah, it's one of those tasks that it isn't fun, but no. You will feel good afterwards.
Yeah, you will, and it's important because it is such an important piece of important part of the process. Okay, so we've got a question here about university fees. So somebody's got a final financial order from a divorce, but there was no provision for university fees. What can now be done? Is it normal during a divorce settlement that no university fees are covered? Is it normal? It depends entirely on the ages of the kids at the time that you're doing your financial settlement, really, because if they're 3 and 4, you're not necessarily going to be incorporating in a final financial order, tying somebody in for university fees at that time. You can put in provision at the time. Some people do, some people don't. It's something that happens when the prospect of university for your offspring is much more real and fairly obvious. So, for example, if they're doing their A-levels, it can be a tricky one to kind of pin down to a certain degree because you don't know what you're going to be having to pay. Frequently, we see recitals, which is the first part of the consent order, so you're the basis upon which the agreement is being made, saying that you both agree to pay 50% of tuition and accommodation costs, for example. It's something that can be dealt with at a later date, not as part of the main order. This is rare, but children, I say once they get to over 18, they are able to make a claim on a parent for financial support for their tertiary education. As I say, it's not popular, but if anybody is interested in looking at that or talking about it, then let us know. Most parents, even after cantankerous, difficult, contentious divorces, I found will support their offspring through university, mainly because the payment is going to the child direct. I say child, they're 18 by that point. The payment is normally going to child direct rather than to the ex-spouse, if that makes sense, which always takes the I was going to say sting out of it, but it becomes a much more adult relationship between the child going to university and the absent parent, perhaps not be an absent parent, but the parent funding tuition fees, going direct to the child rather than the parent, the other parent, perhaps. Right, I think we've got time for another question. Yes, we do. This is a good one. Is it better to take a lump sum or a share of the pension when you're looking at a final financial settlement? My ex has a much bigger pension, but he's offered me a larger percentage of our savings instead. That's all your territory, Jodie, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say you definitely need to speak to an advisor. I think a lot of people don't understand pensions and what they potentially could be giving up. So it very much depends on your situation. You know, do you have pension provisions already? But sometimes actually having a bigger share of savings or the house yeah, it's great right now, but what about your retirement? And that share of a pension could be worth so much more by the time you get to retirement age. So yeah, so some cash flow forecasting is what I usually do with people here, where we put the two options into, a computer, and it shows you how that will affect you later on, and if there's going to be a shortfall later on if you don't touch the pension. So it's a hard question to answer right now, because I'd need more details of the actual, the pension, the savings, your situation, your needs going forwards. But yeah, it's definitely, make sure you consider that before kind of just saying yes and thinking about the immediate needs, because the longer term needs are often forgotten when going through separation, because often you're just desperate to get it done. So I would say it's definitely worth seeking some advice there.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to a divorce lawyer. If you're doing a homemade divorce around the kitchen table, so to speak, then always even still go and see a divorce lawyer, because pensions are a big deal. If you're doing what we call an offset arrangement, so you're perhaps taking more cash in a property or cash out of savings, and instead of taking a pension, you need proper advice to ensure that you are getting a fair deal. You need to make sure you're not being too generous. You need to make sure you're not being shortchanged, and comparing cash and pensions is a minefield, and that's why we do advise that pension expert evidence is secured. You only get one bite of the cherry at this when you're doing a final financial settlement upon divorce, and it is worth obviously pursuing a financial disclosure. We've talked about that before, but it is worth taking the time to make sure you are getting your fair settlement, because you cannot reopen it at a later date. The circumstances in which you can reopen a financial settlement after it's been approved by a court are very, very limited, and really quite rare. Okay, so where are we on the questions? I think we've probably got through everything. That was good of us, Jodie, and we're on time. Awesome.
Timing, yeah.
Cool. Right. Now, there was what you might be able to help with this one, actually, Jodie, because I definitely don't know what it is. Government savings schemes for children. Do you know what they're called? Is it worth investing in them?
It might be they might be referring to the Child Trust Fund, but they don't do them anymore. I think they stopped in 2010, 11. But yeah, the main options now, so you've got premium bonds for children, you can invest in pensions for children, like I said, the junior ISAs, you can get kind of usual child savings accounts, but there are quite a few options, but I don't think there's anything that the government aren't doing anything where they give you money for a child's savings now. Hopefully, I don't really know what they meant by that, but I think that's probably what they meant there. But happy, again, take my email address and email me, and I'll any information, and I can help you.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks, Jodie. That's really kind. Right. I think I'm probably going to bring tonight to a close. Our next Stowe Talks will be next month, obviously Wednesday, 28th of February. We're going to be talking, again, it's still a financial theme. We're going to be talking about recognising and dealing with economic abuse. Okay, hot topic. And it will flow nicely, obviously, from this month's session with Jodie. I'd like to say a massive thank you to Jodie. That was really great. Love the presentation. I've got my notes and I've got my homework, and I know what I need to do now. And thank you very much to everybody who's joined us tonight on this rather wet and windy Wednesday night. And thank you for your questions and your interest, and we'll see you again soon. Lovely. Right. Well, have a lovely evening, Jodie. Lovely to see you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.